Hey, Hakase here. I've been really enjoying this Essence Drain Chronomancer build, so much so that when I died on my previous one at level 72, I just made a new one right away. So I decided to make a video about the build. You can navigate the video using the chapters to skip to specific parts you're interested in. Just as a disclaimer, this is a solo self-found hardcore adaptation of the Lachesis Queen of Chaos build guide by Ichigo, and the video is going to be linked in the corner. Disclaimer number 2 is that this is not a guide, this is just a showcase of how I play Essence Drain Chronomancer in hardcore solo self-found. Let's get into it. Let's start off with the strengths and weaknesses of this build so you can see if it's a good fit for you. So starting off with the strengths, this build is really satisfying and decently efficient in maps with large open spaces. It can also delete magic and rare mobs when they're part of bigger groups of mobs. The build is super beefy, and you don't have any strict unique requirements as we're skipping the ring that allows you to add another curse in solo self-found, so you're free to build resists, energy shield, and have a giga actual offhand shield, plus you get auras that slow mobs via Apex of the Moment ascendancy, and apply a damage done debuff to them via Enfeeble, coupled with huge oh shit buttons of Footprints in the Sand and Ultimate Command. It's also pretty safe on bosses as you get to play the mechanics while the boss is sticking down to dots. It's pretty good for Ritual and Expedition as you can just run around while all the mobs melt around you. The gearing is pretty simple. As mentioned before, you're free to get resistances and energy shield on your gear. The extra curse ring and spirit are nice to haves rather than hard requirements, and there are no specific uniques without which you just can't play the build. It is a build with which you kill stuff pretty slowly compared to some of the OP builds out there, but it still feels satisfying to melt huge groups of mobs and has some nice skill expression. It also keeps up excitement because you kind of have to flirt with death while weaving between packs of mobs. As for the build's weak points, it is really slow in corridors where you can't run laps around enemies and have to deal with one group at a time. The single target is pretty low, so lonely elites and bosses can take a long time, so this is not one for people who get frustrated quickly. Breach can be good if you set up well and keep a chain of death and explosions going, but it can also go very badly if you don't play it right. And the same goes for Delirium. Keep the chain of death going or you're out of luck. Wanting the payoff of being efficient with this build could lead you to dangerous places. Also, slower boss kills mean there's just more boss mechanics for you to deal with, so this build is a little bit risky in that way. Overall, this is a build that has satisfying moments and makes you feel safe, despite not being insanely strong offensively and downright slow as hell on single target. To me, this is a good trade-off in hardcore, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who wants to feel fairly safe, or anyone playing hardcore, while having satisfying gameplay and skill expression to battle frustration and boredom. Okay, so let's get into the skills. And our main ones are Contagion and Essence Drain. Both of them are single target damage over time effects. Essence Drain does a lot of damage over time. Contagion does small amounts of damage over time. But when a target with Contagion dies, it spreads all of our other damage over time effects to all other nearby targets. And Contagion, when it spreads, also does more damage. We have Dark Effigy, which is a totem that bombards our enemies for every, it fires one projectile for every damage over time effect that target has. We have Despair, which is a curse, which reduces enemies' chaos resistance. We have Hex Blast that uses for utility, just to get the chain of death going. Grim Feast, self-explanatory. Withering Presence, I don't have enough spirit for it. And here are some key abilities right from our Ascendancy. Temporal Rift, which teleports you 4 seconds into the past, and also restores your health, energy shield, and mana to the values that you had 4 seconds ago. So you can use, you can get hit for a lot and then press this button, teleport back and be at full health and energy shield again. And Time Freeze, which is our big oh shit button, which basically freezes everything in a huge radius around you, 10 meters radius, and it freezes everything for 3 seconds, which is greatly expanded by our supports and some of our passive points. So let's look at the supports, okay? First of all, Essence Drain, which is our main damage. Drain Ailments, which we will make this, okay, this is more damage when it consumes an ailment from the target. The only ailment we apply is a poison via our Dark Effigy, which we will get into. So this just makes it do more damage. All we're interested in is making Essence Drain do as much damage as possible. Swift Affliction, which makes it do more dot damage. Chaos Mastery, which just makes it do more damage again. And Momentum, so that when we apply it and then we move, the rest of that dot will do more damage. In Contagion, we have Hinder, just slows things that have Contagion applied. So once Contagion starts spreading, everything gets slowed. It's really cool. Intense Agony, which when we apply Wither on a full health target, it does more damage, which means that you want to use Contagion first and then Essence Drain. but that can be pretty hard because once you use Contagion on one mob, it can be hard to hit it with a projectile of Essence Drain. So in those cases, you may want to use Essence Drain first, because once you hit a random mob with Essence Drain, it's much easier to click that mob and hit it with Contagion, especially with Unleash, which every 2 seconds, so every 200% of a cast time, and this spell has 1 second cast time, so every 2 seconds you get to apply Contagion with 1 click on 3 targets. Okay, that makes it a lot easier. There's a huge quality of life. Highly recommend making it easier to hit with Essence Drain. Next up, let's look at Blasphemy supports. Basically, we're using Enfeeble. Okay, we don't want to use, for this build, we don't want to use Despair in Blasphemy, because Blasphemy reduces, if we look at the curses here, 43% less effect of socketed curses. So it cuts the effect of the curse by almost half. So for example, Enfeeble reduces the damage outside of bosses, the damage they deal by 24%. So this becomes more like 13 or 14% less damage. So we don't want to cut the chaos resistance of Despair with Blasphemy, okay? We want Enfeeble. It basically makes us so tanky because whenever something gets close to us, and by the way, this is expanded with Magnified Effect, so it's almost a screen-wide effect. It covers maybe 60% of your screen, 70% of your screen. So whenever something gets close to us, it deals maybe 15% less damage to us, all right? 14% less damage to us, which is a huge DR if you think about it. Everything is also slowed around us through our Ascendancy here, Apex of the Moment. And we still have our oh shit buttons, and we have a shield equipped. So this build is pretty tanky. But anyway, on Blasphemy, you know, it costs 60 spirit per curse. And this is also why we want that node on the passive tree, which allows us to affect targets with more than 1 curse, so that we can have both Enfeeble applied as an aura and Despair applied. So next up we have Dark Effigy, and I think Dark Effigy is highly underestimated most of the time. It fires a projectile per damage over time effect active on any target, and it can fire an infinite number of bolts. So first of all, we increase its cast time with Arcane Tempo because we don't really need cast time for anything else. We're not using Hex Blast as our main damage ability at least. And we also use Withering Touch so that the bolts that Dark Effigy fires apply Wither, which is a debuff that makes targets take more chaos damage, 5% per stack, up to 50%. And very importantly, we use Envenom so that the bolts from Dark Effigy can apply a poison, which is another dot which makes it fire more projectiles, and it also allows us to consume the poison with our Essence Drain to make Essence Drain do more damage. Now on our Despair curse we have Decaying Hex, which applies yet another dot which scales with Intelligence, Impending Doom, which makes things explode, the curse basically explodes when it expires, and Inspiration, which makes it cost less mana. I put Inspiration here instead of Hex Blast because I use Despair more often than Hex Blast, and Hex Blast, basically, I use it to start the chain reaction, okay? When I apply Contagion and Essence Drain to a mob and I just want it to die, that's what I use Hex Blast for. You don't need to place a curse because we apply curses to everything around us already, so we can just Hex Blast them for free. I use Concentrated Effect. This is not my AoE clear ability, it's just used to kill the target that has my dots on it. Control Destruction to make it do more damage with hits, because this is the only spell whose hits we care about, and Execute in case I want to finish a boss faster. This makes it do a lot more damage to it. This helps me on doing more damage to bosses. Of course, the one thing to watch out for is that this consumes a curse, and if we have both Enfeeble applied through the aura and Despair applied, for some reason, or maybe very intentionally, it always consumes Despair first. And now for the, in my opinion, extremely important support gems on our Ascendancy abilities. Temporal Rift, which teleports you back in time. I have Ingenuity. Ingenuity reduces its cooldown so I can use it more frequently. It's a really, really nice spell. It makes you feel good when you use it. You can use it to assist you in grouping up mobs, putting dots on them, on one side of them, and then teleporting to the other side so that the side with dots, that's dying to dots, is running through the side that doesn't have dots applied, and that way you can delete huge groups of enemies. Now for the important part, time freeze, okay, we have Persistence. This is a 3-second freeze on everything in the 10-meter radius, including bosses. 40% more skill effect duration means this is a 4.2-second freeze, and all of these 3 here are just to deal with stuns. This is an ability we use mostly in oh shit situations. You start getting hit by mobs, you're surrounded, and you press this button. It has a 0.7-second cast time, but you can easily get stunned during its use, and it's going to take you another half a second to 1 second to realize you've been stunned and that you can't use the ability anymore, because it does put it on cooldown if you've been stunned during its use. And now you're in a position where you've been getting hit by mobs for like 1.5 to 2 seconds already, and you've just realized that you don't have your oh shit button. So you really don't want to be stunned, okay? You can see this is exactly how I died on my previous level 72 Chronomancer. So we have more stun threshold on it. We have wind wave so that if we do get stunned, things get knocked back and we can move or have time to breathe. And we have Energy Barrier, which basically makes us recharge our energy shield immediately if we do get stunned, and it makes the recharge not stop with hits as well for 2 seconds. It gives us a lot more breathing room and safety whenever we're using this as an oh shit button. And with these 3 supports, I've never been stunned yet while using this ability while mapping on this new character. Okay, so let's have a look at the passive tree, and you'll notice that it deviates somewhat from existing guides or Ichigo's guide, and this is because I followed the guide loosely and just put in my own points wherever I wanted. As I mentioned, I'm not looking to min-max the build right now. I'm enjoying the tier of maps I'm doing right now, which is like level 5s, and I'm not looking to push into the higher tiers of content just yet before I get some Giga gear. And so I'm also not massively interested in eking every bit of damage out of the passive tree. I'm more interested in eking every bit of survival out of the passive tree so that I get to see the higher tiers of content, which I've never been in before. So first off, we got the damage wheels, the obvious chaos damage wheels. I just picked them all up because I want that easy to reach damage. And I took both of those. Probably you won't see people get both of those, but this is extra chaos damage, so this is more damage. And this is extra effect of Withered. And Withered, in my understanding, is just like more damage because the Wither damage increase makes targets take increased chaos damage, but that increase applies after the calculation of all of your chaos damage increases, so it pretty much acts like more damage. On top of that, I take a bunch of energy shield nodes. These ones I have still from early leveling, and I'm gonna reposition probably this side of energy shield recharge rate into more efficient nodes. Here you can see I'm already pathing here, so I'll get probably this and that, and then remove this side, grabbing a bunch of energy shield, big energy shield node here. Reduction to maximum mana doesn't matter because we're not mana hungry at the moment on this build. Huge energy shield node over here. It gives a slower start, so we need to compensate in some places, which, you know, I'm doing here and here. We have the very important node that allows us to apply an additional curse so that we can have our Blasphemy aura with Enfeeble in it, and also apply Despair. Another thing I'm doing that you probably won't see other people do is grab like all of these curse wheels. This gives us a bunch of curse duration, there's curse effect. This gives me kind of quality of life and makes it a lot calmer for me to do bosses because I have to apply curses way less regularly and I'm much more free to dodge mechanics. Other very important nodes, we've got skill effect duration over here, 45%, huge. 40% over here, also huge. And there's another 20% over here, but it's a bit far, so I'm not currently pathing there because I'm not currently bottlenecked in any way by my time freeze. Another thing that I'm just doing, I haven't seen this in guides, is getting extra stun threshold based off of our energy shield because our health, like my health is not that high. And I'm also planning probably at some point to get freeze threshold, but I haven't been frozen yet. Yeah, let's see where that goes. As for the Ascendancy, we're getting Footprints in the Sand to get Temporal Rift, which allows us to teleport backwards in time. We're getting Time Freeze from Ultimate Command, and from the third Ascendancy, Apex of the Moment, which slows everything around us and makes us rely less on Temporal Chains. Although Temporal Chains also increases the time it takes for our debuffs to expire on targets, which is really nice. It's basically effect duration for our curses and dots, and as far as I understand, also Time Freeze. But, you know, getting that unique ring to make us apply 3 curses is very difficult, and obviously you can switch Enfeeble with Temporal Chains, but my personal preference right now is Enfeeble because it's a constant DR. So my overall thinking for the tree, just to explain it a little bit, you can see this directly over here with this energy shield, right? This energy shield recharge nodes here, these 3, they can be way better spent over here and over here. So I can fill this right now, but I'll get 15% reduced energy shield recharge rate, which I will not be battling then with this recharge rate. So I want to have this wheel, and as soon as I have this wheel, I will then unspec out of this and get this wheel as well, you know? So it'll be like a switch when I reach a certain threshold. And I can also probably save 1 passive point over here, taking out these small ES nodes and just pathing through this way to save 1 point. But it is 30% ES after all, and I don't have that much ES for now, so I'm keeping them for now. So in my next few levels, what I'm planning to acquire is getting this wheel, you know, respecing out of those 3, getting this wheel, and then I'll probably be pathing towards the freeze threshold. With this setup, this build is going to lack damage, but it's not going to lack survivability. And again, I'm going into these things like pretty blind. I haven't practiced it on softcore, I've never played softcore, I've never played PoE1. If you don't have enough damage, you can always tune your character and get more damage. but if you don't have enough defenses, you're dead. So that's how I look at it, and that's why my build is like this. So now let's take a very quick look at my gear for those who are interested, starting with the jewels. I think I've been very lucky with jewels, considering this is SSF. I have increased energy shield and energy shield recharge rate. The other two things don't matter. This is really cool, gives me more ES. Skill effect duration, which is BIS for us. And again, increased energy shield and rate, which is amazing. I can't believe I have this jewel and I need to exalt it more. We have, increased spell damage, chaos damage, and increased courage duration, which is also a pretty lucky gem. I don't have any more really good gems, otherwise I could pick them up. Well, I could pick one more up pretty easily over here. And going to our actual gear, again, I think I've been very lucky. I'm way overcapped on fire res, unfortunately, but there isn't currently anything I can do about that. I had the luck of getting a belt with 3 charm slots and good resistances. This is pretty cool. Unfortunately, it doesn't have health or strength to help me use my shield, but yeah, it allows me to use 3 charms. I got Magic Find, a Chaos Resistance charm because my Chaos Resistance is still uncapped, 49%. And a freeze charm because I have, well, decent stun threshold tools, so I'm more worried about freeze. I got this amazing shield which gives me a ton of chaos resistance, and it's got high block. This is insane, and high energy shield. And the snake gives me a lot of energy shield, even though the other stats are not so good. And I finally got a +4 to chaos skills wand, which took me a hell of a lot of gambling to get, let me tell you. Here's the big thing, right? I wanted to take you out into a zone to actually show you time freeze because it's absolutely insane. Okay, look, I'm gonna run into a bunch of mobs and I'm gonna press time freeze. And just notice how long that the enemies are frozen for. Still frozen, there we go, okay? And this works on bosses as well. Look here, I'm gonna walk into Beira and I'm gonna freeze her. And just look at this, like this works on all bosses, including pinnacle bosses. You can just freeze them. That's what makes these skill effect duration wheels extremely useful to pick up. So yeah, that's my look at the Essence Drain Chronomancer. I really love this build. I really suggest it to anyone, especially in hardcore and SSF, because gearing is easy. I know this video is a bit lengthy, but I had to go through everything. I did it as fast as I could. If you're interested in how I leveled this character, if you're interested in leveling for some reason not with like a bow or a quarterstaff, and you're interested in actually leveling with Essence Drain, then check out this video where I covered how I leveled and how I built in hardcore SSF, because there is a significant lack of content out there that covers how to level in hardcore and how to build, like how to actually choose passive points while you're leveling. So I'll see you there.